I'm here, as he mentioned, as a non-family member president of a family-run organization. And that can be a challenging position at times when you're tasked with running the company, but not always privy to all of the decisions that go into what the future of the company is going to look like. And so I'm here to tell you a little bit of story about how I worked with the founder and the board to kind of create more of a shared vision that not only we could understand at the leadership level, but also bring to all of our employees that you can see here in our picture that we just had a company retreat up in Tahoe. So Larry Walker Associates is an environmental engineering. We focus on water resources, and it was created by Larry Walker in 1979. And within a few years, he brought on these 4 employees you can see here. So Gil Wheeler, then Larry's in the middle, his wife Louise, Tom, and Mac. And for all intents and purposes, these are the founders of the company. The ownership stayed with Larry and Louise, but these are the founders. And so when Larry started thinking in the early 2000s about transitioning out, he had been very influenced by an experience he'd had early in his career where he'd worked at a company he thought he'd worked for his entire career, and it was purchased by a larger company. The culture changed and he ended up leaving. So he didn't want to do that. So he explored a whole bunch of different models and ended up deciding on transferring the ownership of the company to his 4 children, but the leadership responsibilities to these folks you see here. So Tom took over as president, and we became a second-generation family business, but had, for all intents and purposes, non-family member company leadership except for the CFO. So when Larry made that transition to the second generation, he did a good job. He set up a really good ownership structure with his children. He said he expressed his desire for it to stay as a family business, and they executed buy-sell agreements between the children so that they could either transfer their shares to their children or sell it back to the corporation. But that was all kept at the family level, right? It wasn't communicated to the company. I've worked there my entire career. I had no idea what the arrangements were. Externally, he went through a process with the leadership to create our values. But he not only created our values, we also created beliefs and behaviors that are associated with those values. And by doing that, it really made a really smooth transition to the second generation because we were all pretty clear on what the expectations were for working at the company, and the goal to keep the culture was maintained. But when I came on in 2018 as the next president, I was really the first non-founder president, and my executive VP and I, Brian, were tasked with growing the company. So we developed a 10-year strategic plan, but as we started implementing that, we kind of started raising all these questions. Well, what about the next generation? What are the plans? How are you going to do a transition? Are they going to come work for the company? They're all starting to graduate college. And it became, when I talked to the board, which is basically the 4 siblings, Brian and I, it was pretty clear that nothing had been discussed since the 15 years ago when Larry set up that second generation transition. So luckily, right around that time, I was invited to join the Tugboat Institute, and my first event was OC Tanner. And they had, the exemplar there, they had a breakout group on company transitions. And we walked in, they handed us a list of questions, and they said, fill out this transition document. At a moment of sheer panic, because I could not answer any of the questions that they were asking of us. But I quickly realized it was a pretty nice group, and it was okay for me to say, I don't know. And also realized I'd been handed an amazing tool that I could take back to the board. So I took that tool back to the board and said, would you be willing to go through a process with me of answering these questions? And while it was pretty overwhelming for them at first to start thinking about it, they eventually agreed, but decided that most of the questions probably needed to be answered at the family level. So they took it back to their family council, which was the owners, though anybody in the family can participate in that family conversation. Spent about 3 or 4 months working through it, and then brought it back to the board for Brian and I to engage with them. It was amazing. We felt like we had a lot of clarity, and though we knew there was going to be some challenging things about implementing the answers to that, we at least knew what we needed to do. But it was not a document we could share with the company. And as you all know, employees are much more interested in transparency now. So we went to Larry and said, would you be willing to create a document like Opert Tanner had developed to document sort of your history and your vision for the company? He readily agreed and developed what we now call our founder's message. And what's amazing about this document is that I can tell everybody as much as I want what Larry wanted, but now we have it in his own words. And it's the why, it's the history, it's the genesis of the company, it's why we do things we do, it's the why behind our compensation structure. So people who ask me those questions, I now have this document. And it also has his vision for the future, as well as guidance for everyone, owners, employees, the future leadership of the company. And it's been an amazing resource for us. We've grown quite a bit over the past few years, and so we felt like we needed to have a meeting. So last fall, we had a meeting where we went over our values again, and we had Larry come speak. And for probably well over half of our company, they had never met Larry. And so it was a huge inspiration for them. They walked away with this hugely better understanding of our company, our culture, and the why of everything. And it also re-engaged Larry with the company. So he had been off taking care of his grandkids for a while. They're all older now. So he's started coming back to our meetings, joining our retreats, and really helped him, get back engaged with the company a little bit. It also enabled us to integrate and create this direct connection in our onboarding program. So we now share this founder's message. And his grandson, who about 5 years ago, he went to film school and he had started creating a movie history. We finally got him to finish that movie history based off of this. And so now we have this movie combined with the document for our onboarding program. And now the executive team has a real clear understanding of where we're going into the future and a grounding for our decision making. And so you often, when you're working with families, or at least I had the experience where one sibling would say, well, my dad had this vision. And then the other one would say, well, no, it was this vision. And I'm like, okay, well, now we have it written down. So I can point back to it and we can talk through what really the vision is and where we should go. And I think the best thing it's done is that it kind of has bridged to that third generation. So I mentioned that, so most of them are just now graduating from college. There's 5 grandkids. I mentioned the one grandson did the movie, but they now have this document that they've read and they're like, okay, I have a better understanding of kind of what the expectations are for me and what I'm coming into. And they've started coming to some of our meetings and getting to know us. I don't know if any of them will join or if they'll just end up being owners in the future, but I think what this has done is, created this shared vision for all of us and a clear understanding and comfort of where the company is going into the future that we can all buy into. So thank you.